We need to talk about the Samsung Galaxy Buds 3 Pro. They just went from this to this. Not everyone's happy about it, but they actually did solve some issues, and we're going to talk about that. In doing so, they've also come up with a whole host of issues, quirks, and features that I think are going to be deal breakers. And if you're new here, of course, we'll talk about sound quality, ambient sound modes, and active noise cancellation modes, because I've measured all of them and I will show you all of that, and we'll compare it and see where it's at in the market. Is it worth the $249? Well, we're about to find out. First things first, they've gone to STEM mode, and yes, they've copied Apple's homework, but they ended up solving 3 issues that existed with their previous version. Issue number 1, fit and comfort. Now, the old Samsung Galaxy Buds Pro 2 actually lodged itself in the ear using silicone tips on one end and a wingtip on the other end. But unlike many other brands that used interchangeable soft silicone tips, for different sized ears, Samsung decided to mold that into the shell of the Samsung Galaxy Buds 2 Pro itself. Wow, that's a mouthful. And that's a problem, because if you've got smaller or larger ears, it just wouldn't fit. This was a very real problem for a lot of people. That's been completely solved because the stem design anchors itself with the silicone tips and the stem, which means it just works for a larger number of people. They've literally reached a wider audience now. For my usage, these are very comfortable and really snug in the ear. Even compared to other stem designs, this is one of the better, more comfortable, more snug ones. Another issue with the old one was that the soft rubberized finish would often completely destroy itself after about a year of usage and would become this dirty, sticky mess. That will not be happening with the new one, although I must say this silver color does look a little bit cheap. I would recommend the white, and I wish they had an all black. Also, can I just say, it's nice to finally one-hand this thing. The old one you couldn't do it, this one you can. Now the third option, which is also very important, I've forgotten. Now, they've also gone from touch controls to squeeze controls, which is great. No more mistouches, either by yourself or because the hood of your hoodie got a little wet in the rain. All that's gone. Having said that, the squeeze controls, you can't do them anywhere on the stem. There's only a small portion of the stem that's susceptible to it, and it's not marked. On devices like the AirPods Pro or the Nothing Ear series, there's a little notch there, and I can't help but feel they could have at least changed the texture or something, because while I'm running, even after I've gotten used to it a bit, I'm kind of feeling for it, hoping I'm squeezing the right spot. But I gotta say, I do like swiping up and down for volume. That's like my favorite gesture for volume ever. Now, they do have these blue and orange markers on the case which line up with the base of the stem of the earbud to help you put it back in, which is great in broad daylight, but even so, it's not the easiest thing to put back into the case. Notice how in an AirPods Pro, the bowl where the earbud sits sort of leads into the slot for the stem. The design leads you into the right place. This one's somehow been made to be more difficult. And honestly, in the dark, it's an absolute pain to do. Now, they could have solved this by making these blue and orange markers light up at night. That would have been really helpful. Samsung, if you're listening, you can take that idea for free. Just run with it. We will all thank you next time around. But instead, they decided to light up the back of the stem instead. They call it a utility light, but it has literally no utility. I mean, it looks cool, but it does nothing except drain your battery life. And while we're talking about that, I thought I may as well make this a microphone quality check. So there's a lot of traffic, it's a bit breezy, and what you're listening to is the Samsung Galaxy Buds 3 Pro microphone. While I talk about battery, look out for these 3 things in my voice while you're talking, right? Is the background being suppressed well enough? Is my voice coming through clearly enough and naturally enough? And 3, is there artifacting? Because sometimes when there's noise cancelling, earbuds will often have sharp sounds cutting through, which you don't want. It's not great for the listener. While you're listening for that, let me tell you about the battery life. It's not great. You only get 5 hours of battery, and while that isn't the end of the world compared to the competition, it's really not great. But you want to know what's worse? There's no fast charging. It takes you an entire hour to charge this from a 0 to 100. A quick 10-minute charge in the case will only give you about 16% battery, so it's really not that great. It's not the end of the world, but the competition at half the price even will charge itself in full in 10 minutes and give you 7-8 hours of battery life. So for $249, this is just not what I expected. Having said that, there's a lot of good stuff, which is why we should probably get talking about features. Okay, so everything's controlled by the Samsung Wear app. So if you're trying to use this with a device which doesn't support a Samsung Wear app, you're out of luck. But before that, if you're on an Android device, you go into the Bluetooth menu settings cog next to the device. Actually, one little quirk here. You'll notice the icon for this device is still the Galaxy Buds 2 Pro icon. They haven't changed that yet, just a little quirk. But in the settings cog, you'll notice this supports Auracast, which is a very cool bit of future proofing. If you don't know what Auracast is, basically it's like setting up a Bluetooth radio station, and anyone with a device that supports it can tune in. So let's say a TV supports Auracast broadcasting. You can have your friends over, and if you're living in an apartment with really thin walls, they can all just tune in, assuming they have devices that can tune in. They can tune in to the TV and watch the movie at any volume they like, which is a very cool thing, and I'm happy they've included it. What I'm not happy about is the fact that multipoint exists, but it's limited to devices that are logged into the same Samsung login, which is ridiculous. Honestly, there are devices at half this price that give you multi-point that's open to all ecosystems and across multiple devices. So Samsung's just limiting themselves on this one. Although if you are embedded in the Samsung ecosystem, I have to say it does automatically switch between devices logged in regardless of whether those devices were ever paired with this. So that's a nice thing as long as you're already completely engulfed in that ecosystem. Now, if you go into the Samsung Wear app, there are a few interesting features. I want to talk about one feature and just dispel some myths. The AI translating thing they talked about, that's not actually a thing. If you use the Translate app on the Samsung phone, it will send any translation to any earbud. I literally used it with my AirPods Pro. It works fine. The only thing this does is when you get that listening mode in a future firmware update to that Translate app, you can basically have that running in the background, go into ambient sound mode by squeezing and holding the stem, and it'll automatically go into that translation. It's just a bit of a shortcut that they've built in. It's not actually a feature that comes with this per se. Now, having said that, they also have some other cool features, and I think the one I want to talk about most, I mean, we'll talk about ANC and stuff in the next section, but the one I want to talk about most is in accessibility, because there's some cool stuff. If you have hearing loss, you can actually boost left or right ears to be louder based on your hearing loss. Or, and this is my favorite thing, you have the ability to cut out all the background noise, but just let voices or things that are similar to voices come through, and this actually works really well. And I prefer this to the regular ambient sound mode because I don't need to hear all that stuff. I just need to hear when someone's calling me, which is great, and it works. So I like this. Which brings us to a few quirks of this device. One of them is neck stretch reminders. Yeah, you can get it to remind you to stretch your neck every once in a while. And it's got a tutorial on how to actually stretch your neck. I should probably look at that at some point. But you also have voice commands. I'm not talking about Google Assistant or Bixby, I'm talking about voice commands. So you can put this in your ear and say volume up, and the volume will go up, and so on. Which is actually quite useful when you're in the middle of a workout, or if you're cycling, you don't want to let go of your handlebar, you can just talk to it. Now, I don't know how well it actually works when there's wind rushing by, but it's an option. Now, also, in an attempt to make your life easier and to copy some more homework, you've got speak to chat. That's the one. Basically, when you speak, it'll go into ambient sound mode and you can have a conversation. When you stop speaking, 5 seconds later, it goes back to normal mode. Pretty cool. We've seen it before. Now you've got it on Samsung. Also, siren detect. That's right. Whenever it detects a siren, it goes into ambient sound mode. So if there's an ambulance behind you and you're in your car and you need to give way, there you go. It'll help you be aware of that. Nice. But look, you can have all the features in the world. At the end of the day, this is a Bluetooth earbud. It's a sound producing device. So how does it handle sound? So let's start with sound quality or sound signature, and then we'll talk about noise handling. So noise cancelling, ambient sound mode, that sort of thing. Sound quality on the Samsung Galaxy Buds have been pretty good for a while now. The previous generation was pretty solid. This one follows in its footsteps. It's really nicely, smoothly tuned, and I suspect this is one of the better tuned earbuds in the market, period. However, generally speaking, their signature doesn't suit everyone, right? A lot of people, including myself, think that the mids or things like grungy guitars or deep male vocals tend to lack a little warmth, lack a little body. And the treble tends to be a little too sharp, a little too spicy. But this time around, Samsung's giving us two different ways to circumvent that. One, a whole bunch of presets, and two, an EQ you can actually use, a multi-band equalizer where you can set your custom preset. My only wish was, as a geek and a nerd and an audiophile, I want even more bands to play with to fine-tune it, but for most people this is plenty good. More importantly, I wish there were more custom preset options. Like, I can easily see myself using 2 or 3 custom presets. But I've gone ahead and made this preset for you. You can pause right now and you can copy it and you can use it. And basically what it does is it adds a little bit of warmth and sort of gravitas to vocals and guitars and adds a little heft, and then it tones down that treble a little bit. It's not a huge change, but it's small, it's subtle, and it makes it, in my opinion, a smoother sound signature overall. Use it as a starting point. Change it up. Do something funky. Make it your own. Oh, and I have to give credit where credit is due. Unlike certain other brands that use these equalizer bands and use some arbitrary scale, on this equalizer, +1 is +1 dB, +6 is +6 dB. Does what it says on the tin. Thank you, Samsung. Overall, I think the combination of the two drivers, a dynamic driver and a planar magnetic driver, is pretty new to the Bluetooth TWS world. But it's nice, it does the job, it sounds pretty good, it sounds better than most other true wireless earbuds in this price category and below. And the fact that it has presets means that you can probably enjoy it with your signature, and that's a good thing. And speaking of great things, let's talk about noise handling. Okay, first, ambient sound mode. I'm going to put up a graph, but I'm going to explain it. It's really simple. First, you have the reference line. This is your reference noise signal. I'm going to put up a second line, which is the same noise, but recorded with an artificial ear after the Samsung Galaxy Buds 3 Pro has processed it in its ambient sound mode. And ideally, the second line should follow the first line 1-to-1. That means everything outside is being reproduced perfectly. That's ideal. And you can see it does a pretty decent job. Not perfect, but pretty decent. Now, in some cases, honestly, some noise crept in a little too much. It was actually amplified a bit, and that was bothersome, but in most cases, this sounded really natural. So if the AirPods Pro, for example, is S tier, and it is S tier, it's the best ambient sound there is, period. The Bose Quiet Comfort Ultra is very, very close second. That's also S tier. Effectively, this is probably A tier. Still very, very good. Now you'll notice it also has an adaptive sound mode. What this does is prioritize ambient sound, but every time it goes above a threshold, above a certain loudness, it starts to cancel those sounds out. So it's a nicer version of ambient sound, or basically another version of what Apple does. But it's a good one, because if you want ambient sound but you still want to protect your ears from excessive levels, that's the one you want. Now, let's talk about the big one, active noise cancellation. Okay, so you've got a slider. You got 0 to 100%, and I measured it at 0, 50, and 100%, and the results were rather odd. So at 100%, this is the reference line, and this is the noise reduced line. This second line should be as low as possible across as many frequencies as possible. That means it's doing a great job across the frequency spectrum. Unfortunately, the Buds 3 Pro does not. You can see it does really well in the bass, and you can see it does mixed in the mids. The problem is that it lets a lot of noise in that highs section, in the whatever high frequency noise there is around you. So what does this mean? It means that if you're on a public bus, right, with a lot of low end rumble because it's got a diesel engine or whatnot, it cancels it out beautifully. You are going to love this thing. It's going to make this so quiet. You're going to love it. But if you're in a cafeteria with a lot of high-pitched voices around you and things clanging, all of that's going to come in, and it is very noticeable. Also, if you're on an aircraft, which I was recently and I got to test these out, it does cancel out a lot of the low-end stuff, just like the graph says. But so much of the high-frequency noise from the engines come in that it's just unbearable. It's really bad on aircraft, and hopefully a firmware update helps this out in the future. They can fix it. I can think of a way that you can fix it, Samsung. Please do, because this is really not great in certain circumstances. In many circumstances, it works pretty well, but just that spike in the highs is the only reason I cannot give it S tier. In fact, it's so bad, I would drop this down to a B or a C tier even. And here's the thing, you're gonna see a lot of reviewers saying it's awesome because they haven't tested it. Most people don't measure it, but I'm giving you the proof. But also, not everyone gets the opportunity to test it in certain situations. I've had that opportunity, and I can tell you there are situations where it's just not that great. If you want the best noise cancelling, you should probably still go for the Boses and Sonys, with the Samsung coming in a second. I'm not even going to say a close second, because that spike in the highs is just, it's not great. Overall though, I think ambient sound is good, I think sound quality is good, and I think ANC in some situations is pretty good. In other situations, you're better off with earplugs. So, what do we think about the Galaxy Buds 3 Pro then? Honestly, it's a bit of a mixed bag. The fundamentals are that, yes, it's not that easy to put back in the case, but I'm nitpicking a little. These are things you can get over. Squeeze controls work as advertised and they work well. Volume up and down on the swipe, I love that. And the form factor is comfortable and it stays snug. These are the basics. Then it produces sound really well. It's one of the better sounding earbuds in the industry right now. And if you don't like the signature, you can change it yourself, which is great. You can use my preset. Finally, noise cancelling. Ambient sound mode works really well. Noise cancelling could be better. I really wish, as Samsung's flagship device, they did a better job, but they kind of messed up on this one. Honestly, it was doing so well right up to that high frequency zone that, I mean, what can I say? It is what it is. If they have a firmware update improving that, then this becomes a very easy recommend even at $250. But if noise cancelling is what you want, then I would steer you to other options. Options like the Sony XM4, not so much the XM5. The XM5 has an issue where it doesn't cut out low frequencies quite that well, but the Bose Quiet Comfort Ultra, if you get those on sale, honestly, it's just night and day. It's that good. And for features, honestly, it's so quirky. There are some good features, but limiting multi-point the way they've done makes no sense. It's just effectively not available to a lot of us. Why would you do that, Samsung? And also the battery life. It's fine, but in a pinch, you're gonna have to put it back in your case for a good at least half an hour, and even then you get only 2.5 hours of battery. So it's an hour of charging realistically if you want to use it for a good period of time, which may be okay for you, but compared to the competition, it certainly doesn't measure up. So I think there's some improvements to make, but they have nailed some of the basics. If they do come out with a version 2, a next iteration, or a Pro 4, I guess, and if they solve some of these issues, that thing is going to be so good. That's the one I would freely recommend. This one, you've got to answer those questions. Is the battery life enough for you? Is the ANC an issue for you in that high frequency range? And so on. Tell me what you think in the comments down below, but please, for heaven's sake, hit that subscribe button and become a YouTube member, because we do giveaways automatically. You become a member, you get giveaways. That's it. I'll see you in the next one. Stay happy, stay peaceful, stay colorful. Namaste.